The Eagles' offense is going to change this year, after some fresh faces were hired to bring in some really interesting ideas. But one in particular has Nick Sirianni very fired up. Plus, why Philly can't stop looking at Georgia Bulldogs, now the latest draft drama at the top of round 1 will dramatically impact the Birds. I'm Thomas Mott, this is the Thomas Mott Show. I think one of the more forgotten aspects of the Eagles' entire offseason has been the complete revamping of their entire offensive coaching staff. As of course, Kellen Moore's departure not only left a hole at offensive coordinator, but quarterback coach as well. And while Kevin Patullo is a familiar but albeit unknown offensive coordinator, I think the real wild card for the Birds' 2025 offense was the hiring of Bowling Green Scot Loeffler to be the new quarterback coach. Loeffler, as I talked about whenever they hired him, is extremely experienced as a coach overall, but mostly at smaller schools like BGSU. So naturally, the questions of how can he help improve Jalen Hurts are legit ones. But I think the uniqueness of this hire as your quarterback coach is the most exciting part. And Nick Sirianni seemed to echo that during his press conference earlier this week.
Yeah, just, you do a lot of work. You interview a lot of different guys. You cast a very wide net in the attempts to find the right person. And there was a lot of good candidates that we interviewed. Scot stood out. Probably called a ton of guys. We called a ton of guys to, not only the interview process, but then the vetting process at the end to call the guys to see what he's like, and it just kept coming back. This guy's obsessed with football, loves football. It's just a grinder and just very knowledgeable on the quarterback play. And we're able to get some new, fresh ideas from him and the things that he's done as the head coach at Bowling Green and in prior times before that. And so, really excited about the addition of Scot. We'll see. Yeah, you'll see. Like, not going to get specific into that. I mean, fresh ideas. Like, obviously, we hired him to be the quarterback coach and to continue to develop, help Jalen Hurts continue to rise. And he's an expert at quarterback play. I mean, he, again, like I said, he's just obsessed with football. But the new ideas, what I was speaking of with new ideas, are some of the things that they ran offensively that just give us fresh thoughts into our offense.
We need to remember the Birds' offense last year was, yes, electric, and rightfully so. Philly had a ton of explosive plays, especially in their most recent games, playoffs, Super Bowl, NFC title game, for instance. But for all of the Saquon Barkley heroics, there were times when the offense did struggle, especially in the passing game. I'm thinking back to matchups like the Saints game, where the offense only scored 15 points, or that really odd home game against the Carolina Panthers, where Jalen Hurts threw for just 108 yards, and the offense was kind of up and down. Again, I'm not saying the offense was bad. They were way, way better than any of us could have imagined, but they still have areas to improve, especially through the air. And I really think that's where Loeffler comes in and why Sirianni seems so excited about him when asked about all the new hires this past offseason, because if the passing game can improve, even by 10%, the Philadelphia Eagle offense, which, again, dominated everybody, is going to absolutely crush the National Football League in 2025. Now, of course, Saquon Barkley is still going to get his. There's no debate about that. But Loeffler's job now is to make sure Jalen Hurts continues his upward trajectory. He needs to make sure that the Jalen Hurts we saw, especially in this year's postseason, is the Hurts we get each and every week during the regular season. We need to remember the Birds' passing attack last year was 29th in the NFL. And again, for the 50th time, Saquon played a massive role in that. Again, I'm not debating, but imagine if Loeffler Patullo could take the Birds' passing attack from 29th overall to maybe the top 15. Even the 12th best passing attack paired with a top 3 rushing attack will be light years more lethal than the team we saw win a Super Bowl last year. And for me, the biggest area of improvement for the Birds' passing game has to be the complexity of route trees, especially for wide receivers on the outside, but also Jalen Hurts' ability to read defenses post-snap. Now, I think last year we saw a much improved pre-snap version of Jalen Hurts, especially getting the Eagles into running situations when they were in passes and changing the play at the line of scrimmage. But the Super Bowl interception early on versus the Chiefs was a good example of poor defensive reading after the snap. If Loeffler can get this area of Jalen's game from the already impressive B- it is to an A+ post-snap, the passing attack is going to be virtually unstoppable. Now, how exactly will Loeffler and Patullo do this? Honestly, I have no idea. I say this all the time. New coaching hires are massive unknowns. No one knows before the season if Vic Fangio is going to be good or if Sean Desai is going to stink. We need to see the actual on-the-field product to judge. but I'm loving what I'm hearing out of Philadelphia right now. And again, I think the Birds offense, as great as it was in 2024, can only begin to reach their full potential with this new coaching staff heading into 2025. Now, my previous video did hit 50,000 views, so giving away the Super Bowl towel you could only get if you were actually at the Super Bowl, and the winner was Travis Fatrell8949. So Travis, go to my description box, send me an email, prove it's you. Everybody else, watch out for scammers. And I have another one of these towels. Let me know if I should give it away down below in the comments section, and get ready for a crazy month of April for giveaways because we're approaching 1,000 subscribers here on the channel. Now, speaking of the NFL draft, and the Eagles this week brought in UGA offensive guard Dylan Fairchild for another top 30 visit, which brings the total number of top 30 visits in Philadelphia so far to 14, half of those being on the offensive line. As I explained earlier in the week, last year's Eagles only drafted position groups that they had brought in for a top 30 visit in 2024. So again, safe to say, offensive line, as we know, will be a priority in this draft. There is, however, another UGA prospect I'm definitely keeping my eye on to see if he gets a top 30 visit in edge rusher Jalen Walker, as he recently sat down with Kay Adams and expressed his love for his former Georgia teammates that now happen to be Philly Dogs.
I know you're not going to be there for him at 32. I understand that, but I can't imagine he's not scheming away because he just somehow finds a way to get all those Georgia Bulldogs on the team. Nolan and Jordan and Jalen and Dean and Ringo, Lewis, they're all there. There has to be,
Right.
is there a linebacker group chat, a Georgia linebacker group chat?
We have one every year. We don't have one for all the linebackers together, but I have one with the current linebackers and Smile and still some of the guys from my freshman year. And, we still texting it till this day.
Walker would be the perfect pick for the Eagles in round one. Versatile outside linebacker, edge rusher, obviously a Georgia connection there. Problem is, he's likely going to go in the early to mid-teens, maybe fall to the early 20s, so Philadelphia would have to trade up to go ahead and get him. Although Philadelphia might have a better shot at a prospect they want earlier in round one, based on a new shakeup in the draft surrounding quarterbacks that could help drop some top-level talent closer to the Birds' first pick, according to Adam Schefter.
And it certainly feels like the Cleveland Browns are inclined to look elsewhere aside from quarterback. And it's starting to feel like the New York Giants at number 3 are starting to look elsewhere other than quarterback.
The Eagles' biggest problem in this draft is the lack of superstar quarterbacks. There's not going to be 6 taken in the first round, 5 taken in the top 10. What they need, though, is to go ahead and still have another quarterback rise up into round 1, like a Jackson Dart. So maybe with the fact that Giants might not take a quarterback at number 3, could shift the entire draft back a little bit because Dart then comes up, Shador then falls to 7, 8, 9 area, and Philadelphia gets a better chance at getting an edge rusher or a safety. Now, speaking of trades in the NFL draft, it is worth reminding you that Trey Hendrickson, remember him, the Bengals star edge rusher that Philadelphia was linked to and then, of course, never traded for, remains unsigned and unhappy with the Cincinnati Bengals, despite, of course, reports past couple of weeks saying the Bengals have tried to work on a new contract extension. Now, Hendrickson's recent comments of, quote, communication has been poor over the last couple of months. That's something I hold in high regard. They have not communicated with my agent directly. It's been something that's been a little bit frustrating, and I'm starting to wonder if he could be dealt during night 1 of the NFL draft. Now, obviously, I'm not saying the Eagles will trade for Trey Hendrickson, but if Trey Hendrickson were to get dealt in the first round of the NFL draft, that means a team ahead of Philadelphia who needs an edge rusher now becomes no longer interested in drafting a rookie edge rusher. Also moving over to Dallas again, talked about them earlier this week, and the Cowboys on Thursday made a very interesting trade as they went ahead and moved for polarizing Patriots backup quarterback Joe Milton for a 5th round draft pick. Now, Milton is one of these speculative guys that people think could be a starter one day. Obviously, he hasn't really done that so far in the National Football League, and obviously he's coming in to back up Dak Prescott, but for all the Cowboys' pitfalls the past couple of off seasons, I kind of like this move, and it makes me wonder if Dak's time in Dallas, despite his massive contract extension, could be shorter than we realize. Now, as always, earlier this week, myself and Josh Davis, we met on our Wednesday Link Live and discussed a ton of Eagles topics, including potential draft picks, but also if they could trade Dallas Goedert during night 1, maybe night 2 of the NFL draft. And here were our thoughts on that and a whole bunch more. Yeah, it's interesting just kind of where we're going here the next couple of weeks, right? I think Dallas Goedert is kind of the linchpin of the NFL draft and really the biggest potential non-draft pick move that Philadelphia might make in the coming days. Now, I think we both would agree that's probably going to happen during the NFL draft. Day 2, something were to go down. Day 1, maybe if they want to get, a 3rd round draft pick, if they're lucky for Dallas Goedert, more like a 4th or a 5th round draft pick. That seems like the move that they keep hinting at. And during the NFL owner meetings, we both talked about it the past couple of days. There wasn't really a glaring, what's the word here, rave for keeping Dallas Goedert by Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman. It kind of sounded like they were both saying, hey, he's on our team right now, But we'll see. So I think he's going to be the next big move to go ahead and fall. And then I do think that Howie has his eyes on this NFL draft. We talk about it not being a very top-heavy draft, but you did mention it there. And Anthony DeBono's done a great job covering it on all of his stuff, basically saying that there's plenty of depth to be found in round 2, round 3, round 4. And I think the Eagles are very confident in the current young core. Safety continues to be the concern for me. I think Sidney Brown is the one player that I just need to see more of. He hasn't really gotten to play a lot due to the injury and the fact Gardner Johnson got, acquired this past offseason. Everybody else to me seems fine. I think Jeremiah Trotter Jr. can be a really good linebacker. And I really think that the key there is Vic Fangio showcasing that he can make anybody, Oren Burks, Zach Bond, whoever you want, Nakobe Dean, all of them played their best football of their entire career this past season in the first year of Vic Fangio. And so 2 years for Jeremiah Trotter Jr., year 2 after having his rookie season, I think he's going to be okay. I'm just very curious to see where they go in this NFL draft, because I think they had another meeting today or earlier this week with another offensive lineman, the one from Georgia. So it's been almost 2-1, maybe even 3-1 on their top 30 visits being offensive linemen. And a lot of me thinks that this is just Jeff Stoutland wanting to meet everybody. That way he can kind of pick the right card out of the deck. But it also tells me maybe they really think they want to get an extra offensive lineman if they're worried about Tyler Steen, or if Landon Dickerson got a little bit too hurt too many times this past offseason, or, Lane Johnson is 35 years old, got to have his replacement. Maybe that's where they're going to go in the draft and be a little bit surprising, I would say, with their first round draft pick.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of those visits. We will say there's plenty left, right? I think we're at 13.
Yeah, we got a lot left.
They could do 17 more.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem as likely for a trade-up scenario yet. Let's just say that. Yet. They've still got 17 more that could come in. But if we were looking at a trade-up scenario, I feel like they will. It would be surprising if they don't, but I feel like they will bring in a Malachi Starks. But wouldn't you just do that? Because on the off chance, if he's starting to fall just a little bit, then you maybe consider trading up. It's a Philly dog situation. You set yourself up for that move. So maybe, but we haven't seen that. We haven't seen Nick Emamwari get brought in yet. We haven't seen a Shamar Stewart get brought in yet.
Yeah.
We haven't seen a Walter Nolan get brought in for a top 30 visit. Now, they've been to a lot of these pro days, as a lot of teams are, but the top 30 visit is kind of that extra tip of the cap to say, okay, we're really considering bringing you in, or really considering drafting you. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're at, off the top of my head, out of those 13, probably... What's that got to be, like 6? Are we 6 or 7 offensive linemen?
At least half. I think we're at half right now.
So
pretty crazy.
I feel like we say this every single year. It's not the sexy pick for an offensive lineman. It's like never the sexy pick for an offensive lineman. But if at 32 an offensive lineman is taken, the majority, I'm going to just say, I know that a lot of people will be like, no, that's a solid pick, but the majority of people will probably be like, you got to be kidding me. At 32, we're getting an offensive lineman. We don't need that person yet. Lane Johnson playing like he does. But if they do that, they feel strongly enough. And I might say to myself, I might even say publicly on the stream, I might be like, yeah, I don't know necessarily. Depending on who's available there, we could have gone a different direction. But personally, I would prefer if we go edge, interior D-line. Heck, you could potentially even go safety, depending on who's available. That would be my hope, is you go defense instead of offensive line, because there's some other guys, and the Jeff Stoutland argument that we always make of just throw him a random 3rd rounder, 4th rounder, 5th rounder, and say, who do you want? Who do you like out of who's available? And
even
you can make him good
rounder.
Enough. Sure,
second rounder's been successful. I mean, you look at Cam Jurgens, Landon Dickerson, those guys kind of came out of nowhere. Not really nowhere, but it wasn't necessarily like we have to get an offensive lineman at this point. I think people kind of thought that you could wait one more year for the Cam Jurgens, Jason Kelce replacement. Thank goodness they went ahead and got him a year early. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Let's just say that. I think it's going to be very interesting. And I think that as the final, whatever the number is, 15, 16, 17, top 30 visits come to Philadelphia, we get a clearer picture. And I really am waiting for the safeties to kind of come in. They have to take a visit with Malachi Starks, right? They have to take a visit with Nick Emmanwari. It'd be crazy if they didn't. If they truly think Sidney Brown's the guy, which I hope so, because then you have to spend a 1st round draft pick on Malachi Starks. But if they truly think he's the guy, then it's going to take a lot of trust from Eagle fans going into training camp, and maybe even early on in the season, for us to be like, okay, just trust Fangio. We're going to see what happens. Remember, Gardner Johnson was getting ripped to shreds the first 4 games of the season. I mean, there were people saying he looks awful in coverage, one of the worst open field tackle rates in the NFL, and then he figured it out.
He did look awful in coverage. I mean, yes, he did. He definitely did. But then he turned things around. So,
we'll see. It's nothing against Sidney Brown. I mean, I think Sidney Brown has all the tools to be the guy. It's just a matter of, has he had enough reps and can he stay healthy? And will he be healthy enough to be 100% ready to be, an every down safety to the caliber that, C.J. Gardner-Johnson was this past season? So we'll see.
Yes. One thing that I'll say real quick, actually, let me just mention this before we get there, because I see this is a little bit later because it's already been brought up by Frank from Philly, but the Dallas Goedert traded to the Carolina Panthers for a 4th round pick.
It's not real.
It's not, it's not real. I know people are like, hey, wait, maybe that's legit.
Yeah.
So
did it happen?
I did see a lot of those April Fool's jokes going around of like, hey, trade, signing, who's this guy? But yeah, not official. It would have been bigger news. You would know for sure if it was fake or real. Let's just say that. If it actually happened, we would, of course, be titling this stream like Dallas Goedert traded, like something of that sense. But no, there's not been a Dallas Goedert trade yet. We could see one, who knows, sooner rather than later. Maybe they wait till June, July.
Maybe.
I will say, though, going back to the previous comment on that side, when I look at Sidney Brown, it's questionable for the safety. The whole C.J. Gardner-Johnson trade. They're looking at Justin Reed, so I'm just like, do they fully believe in Sidney Brown, or was it like they traded, they missed on Justin Reed, and now by default they believe? I mean, they believed in him, but it's like now we really believe in him because we kind of have to. That's the only potential concern. But I'm with you. I'm with a lot of other people. You see the tools that he has, how he's, tools in his body wording. Like, you see what he can do.
Yeah.
It's just, he's got to refine it. He can't be like full speed all the time. It's pick his spots, pick his moments, because he goes flying past someone and misses a tackle, or he's processing too quickly and all of a sudden he gets beat in coverage. He could be great. He's the Red Star player. We mentioned a couple different times. They scouted him that way for a reason. And I think there's, certainly an aspect of it because, look, he was coming off of his injury, the torn ACL. He didn't get to practice in training camp. He didn't get to have those reps. So it was later in the season once he was finally back on the field. And, for a guy of his stature, second year of the league, last year, which was whenever he was trying to get back out there, I think it's probably more of a difference maker than you say a 10-year vet who's recovering to be like, well, they still need to get back up to game speed, but like mentally, you're trying to learn this Fangio defense, and it's one thing to get mental reps, and it's another thing to actually get out there on the field and go, okay, does he look right? Does he look like he can be out there and make plays? I mean, heck, Cooper DeJean was not doing well enough for Vic Fangio to say he was ready yet until post-bye week. So I don't know. There's a chance. Maybe Sidney Brown. I'm not saying I'm kind of in between. I'm not saying like a yes for sure he's going to be solid, but I'm also absolutely not writing him off. Like, there's no going, oh, this would be just terrible. I'm just questioning, like, man, it's a lot. It's a lot of a double down on the youth movement. Let's hope these guys are there, but yet at the same time, we say you draft these guys for a reason. You draft them as a 3rd round pick. We'll see.
Then the Giants, it's Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, 1-2. Then it gets interesting because the report today is that Shedeur Sanders is not guaranteed to be a Giant. There are a lot of people who don't think Shedeur Sanders would have been a 1st rounder in last year's draft. Like, there are a lot of people who have a lot of concerns about Shedeur being worth a top 5 draft pick. Now, that's kind of up to you. He's a very unique player in terms of what he's had to deal with and what he's kind of been, through the course of his collegiate career. I mean, he comes from nowhere. And then, Jackson State is not necessarily a powerhouse program, right? And even though he balled out there, it's like, okay, do it in the big leagues. And he goes to Colorado, and he has a lot of really great moments, but he also has a lot of bad moments that not a lot of people want to talk about. And so, do you spend the 3rd overall draft pick when you just signed Russell Wilson, you just got Jameis Winston? Can you afford to miss on a quarterback if you're that, coaching staff and front office? And then if Shedeur doesn't go 3, is he a lock to the Raiders next? Does he fall out of the top 10? That's going to be the interesting part so far of this first round, is where Shedeur Sanders goes, because you also got to go ahead and mix in the Heisman Trophy winner, Travis Hunter, who people maybe like more. There's a scenario where the Giants go Travis Hunter instead of a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman, which they obviously need, or obviously Shedeur Sanders. So Abdul Carter is going to go ahead and be the number 2 overall draft pick, and Philadelphia has no shot.
This won't happen, but what would be the emotions if a wide receiver is taken at 32 via Luther Burden or Matthew Golden or even Ibuka?
Emotions would be shocked because I don't think it's going to happen. Jahan Dotson really can be something this year. I would buy a lot of Jahan Dotson stock going into 2025. Not to say he's going to have 1,000 yards, but to say that he easily doubles his production this past season, which is, because again, Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, they're taking all the production, 90%, so he only gets 10% of the touches, right? But if Dallas Goedert's gone, then I think Dotson's going to be a lot more productive than people realize. And Philadelphia knows that. They spent a high draft pick to go ahead and get him, and so they kind of need to make sure they, use everything they possibly can out of him before he goes to free agency. I do wonder about Avery Williams, Josh, because I talked about this on my show today.
Yes.
Nick Sirianni was asked this question yesterday during, his NFL owners meeting, and Sirianni had a 30-minute press conference, and he talked about a lot of different stuff, but then he was asked about phrase and additions, and he named all of them, but then twice went back to Avery Williams and how excited he was for Avery Williams, who is this, D1 kick and punt returner who, in 2022 2021 broke or tied, I guess, the Division I record for kick return and punt return touchdowns with 9. He was number 1 in punt return yards for the Atlanta Falcons in 2022. Injuries have been a problem for him, and he hadn't really found his forever home. I do wonder if Avery Williams has a little bit more up his sleeve in Philadelphia, or they do for him, than just kick and punt returns. Because the past couple of seasons, and I talked about this with on my show today, they've tried to find the gadget guy. They've tried to find this guy who can be a slot receiver, do some end arounds, kick coverage, punt coverage. Britton Covey, for instance, and these special teamer worked out very well before the injury. And then drafting Ainias Smith this past season, Josh, that was what they drafted Ainias Smith for. They clearly see a role for this kind of gadget guy, and I think they want to utilize it more going forward. And Nick Sirianni talked about, changes to the offense as well with the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach. But I do wonder if Avery Williams is going to be someone that actually means something this year. Not a crazy role because of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, but a little bit more than I initially thought when they signed him, because I kind of saw him as like a, not a big deal. And the NFL draft, it's still a couple of weeks away, but it's basically here. This channel is going all in on the Eagles draft for the next couple of weeks. Be sure to go ahead and subscribe and get ready for giveaways, maybe get into 100,000 subs, and obviously our Drive live stream happening on night 1 and night 2 of the NFL draft. It's going to be a ton of fun. I'm Thomas Mott, hanging out here. This has been the Thomas Mott Show.